Greetings travelers, I'm Gav. Welcome to another Last Epoch lore video. Today's video is a special one. They had the lore master of Last Epoch himself on the stream, EHG Kyle. I can't wait to share the footage that I got with all of you, and I hope that they do more of these soon, because it was absolutely awesome. I've edited down the entire Q&A to only include the lore questions that Kyle was asked. I'll also include some images for further context, as well as the chat log if I could find it for the questions that were asked. Once Kyle's finished answering the question, I'll also give my take on it, as well as point out any major implications that his answers might have had. There were a ton of great questions. Fitz in chat was helping gather questions and funnel them to Kyle, and from there, Kyle was just picking them up as they came across on their end. So a few questions are out of order and the chat timestamps will reflect that. Also, Eagles, one of the moderators in the official Last Epoch Discord, had about 20 of their questions answered. They had prepared a list beforehand. I joined the stream late, unfortunately, due to being held up at work. They were about halfway through, but even still, I had some of my personal lore questions answered that I submitted in the chat. I rewatched this full VOD several times and several more while editing all of this together, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to my new community Discord server, Gav's Last Archive. I want it to be a place to chat with me about the lore, my content, or just anything Last Epoch. Also, if you stay until the very end of the video, Kyle drops an absolute bombshell of a surprise in the community.
Do you have anything you want to add on to the end of this? Anything you were hoping to get asked that didn't get asked?
Oh goodness.
What Kyle announced at the end actually led to a very fun event in game on Friday night, so definitely stay tuned for that as well. Subscribe to my channel if you learned something about Last Epoch today. And now, here's EHG's very own lore master, Kyle. Let's get into it.
We're going to be doing a lore-focused stream today, so I would really like to encourage everyone to bring questions about the lore you've got, if there's anything you've been wondering about, or cool things you're curious about, anything lore related. This is Kyle's wheelhouse. This is who we want to be talking to.
And it looks like we already have a question right off the bat, and I'll go ahead and just read it out. Why are there no fish NPCs in the game? We have bird people for Raya, the Osprix, elk people for Hera, the Wingari, snake people for Majasa, not the Scalebane, that's actually the Nagasa. The Scalebane are the bandits in the area who actually oppose the Nagasa, hence Scalebane. Anyways, and humans with Eterra. Why did Lagan not make his own people? So, fun fact, there actually is a follower race for Lagan. It's the Maruna. And as I'm sure if you played through the chapter featuring Lagan, I always had the I almost said chapter G because I've got the dev names in my head instead of the numbered names. That'd be chapter 8. So yeah, so if you play through chapter 8 featuring all the Lagan stuff and the Isle of Storms, I'm sure you've have run into the Maruna Sirens and the Adrift Maruna and the Maruna Ogres. Those are actually the equivalent of the Wingari and the Osprix and the Nagasa. The reason why you don't really encounter any Maruna NPCs, it kind of ties into Lagan's nature of being a more kind of chaotic, neglectful, kind of capricious god. Lagan just wasn't really interested in making societies and culture with his Maruna, as opposed to the more hands-on Raya and Herod and Majasa. And a lot of the culture organization you see in Lagan's domain is actually done by architect Liath, who kind of took on that role of kind of actually organizing this place instead of just letting it just kind of be storms and left to pirates. So the Maruna are fish NPCs, and you don't really get a chance to interact with any really because they don't really have a reason to try and interact with humans. They just want to eat them. So that is first, the relationship of the Maruna with humans is much less open for interactions compared to the other follower races, and a lot of that comes down to Lagan's kind of neglectful nature.
Kyle also followed up on this question.
Fun fact, I'm sure many people now have interacted with our item factions, the Circle of Fortune and Merchants Guild. Very early on in the planning stages of the Circle of Fortune, one of the NPC ideas we actually played with, ended up not going with, was the idea of having a Maruna in a tank of water kind of kept in the back of the Circle of Fortune, and they'd be divining prophecies using starlight filtered through water, and we ended up not going with that for a variety of reasons. But there actually was, a Maruna NPC in the plans for a little bit there before we pivoted to something, that worked a little bit better. So we have considered having Maruna NPCs in the past, and actually quite recently.
Nice.
Lagon's people are the Maruna, but Lagon is not a nurturing father. He's selfish and neglectful, and as chaotic as the seas of his very domain. The culture and civility built up around Lagon's territories was all the doing of Architect Liath, Lagon's first in command. It also sounds like EHG were very close to having a Maruna NPC that was interactable and part of the COF faction. We may see a revisit of Maruna as NPCs in the future. Next up is regarding a unique item's flavor text.
Alrighty, next question. What are the other 6 rings besides being referred to on Red Ring of Atalaria? What's influenced by Lord of the Rings or Landed Corpus ring colors, excluding the OP black and white? Do we get more lore about them when the next chapters come? Is Atalaria a person or a place? So I will say, I'll be upfront here, the lore on the Red Ring of Atalaria and the other rings isn't something that's going to be touched on that soon. It's definitely more of a loose end for us to build on in the future. So I'm not gonna say what the next chapters focus on, just to avoid spoilers. But the rings, I will say, aren't going to be a big factor in them currently planned, at least.
I also think it was the name, anyways, was a nod to Phantasy Star.
That's one that was actually, I believe, that was pitched by Holly probably a long time ago. So I'd have to check in with Holly and see what she. Yeah, hey Holly, what's the inspiration there? Let's collab with some more real quick for these. Yeah. So that's one of those kind of fun instances of just kind of the collaborative nature of lore and the kind of I don't want to say improv, but natural kind of organic evolution of lore on some areas. Once I get into a DM with Holly, hey, tell me what you're thinking with the Red Ring of Eterra, we might end up with some really big things we could do here in the future. So yeah.
It sounds like this ring in particular, and a lot of the flavor text of their uniques, aren't all meant to be taken literally quite yet. They're just building blocks, and lore that they can feel free to expand upon in the future. The next question was about changing and updating the acts.
Have you guys had to go back to iterate on /polish /change older acts as you went? And if so, are there plans to redo some of the older acts if time permits in the foreseeable future? So, that's a fun question because we have done that quite a lot. The game has been available to players through Steam. Oh, I forget when we launched on Steam. Was it 2018 or 2019 that we finally got on Steam?
If you Google Last Epoch, it says it has a release date. That's the Steam beta release date.
Right, and before that, we had the non-Steam client that was available to players for a bit before that.
April 30th, 2019. That was the beta on Steam release.
Yeah. So we have revamped a lot of chapters as time has gone on. The most recent chapter revamp, obviously, is Chapter 1. That got a big overhaul in 9.1. That was a very, very big chapter overhaul, and it was a big way to kind of bring the beginning of the game up to our current standards. The fun fact about that is the Chapter 1 before that, the original version of Chapter 1, wasn't the first chapter of the game originally. The first chapter of the game was originally what is now Chapter 2. There was a version of the game for quite a while and the story, of course, where you started in the Ruined Era. You started in Last Refuge. There, in the earliest versions of the game's plot, every player character is from Last Refuge, and that's a big kind of story pivot we ended up doing when we introduced the original version of Chapter 1, because we wanted a different type of start to the game. We wanted a start of the game that introduced the Raya faction a lot earlier. We wanted to start the game that could show off. We finally learned how to make grass and trees look good, and we're hey, we should show this off way earlier as opposed to going from Ruined Era to Imperial Era and then not see a pretty tree in 20 hours of gameplay. Yeah. So we pivoted to making turning the original Chapter 1 into Chapter 2, and then made Chapter 1 And chapter 1 was like that for a few years until we turned it into, the big overhaul did recently. That's not counting how many times chapter 2, your first chapter in Last Refuge, has changed over time. That's not counting how we took, let's see here. Yeah, chapter 2 and 3, those both have been revamped a couple of times at least. Like, there used to be a lot more side quests in Chapter 3 that we trimmed down and replaced with more interesting things. There used to be a lot of side zones in Chapter 2 that were just nothing but a Hall of corridors using the same palette. Like, we have done lots of chapter reworks. At this point, I believe, as far as, like, development-wise, the oldest chapters are 4, 5, and 6. As far as, like, not being touched on heavily with revamps or reworks. And we do want to go back and bring those up to our higher, standards at some point. It's just that kind of tricky balancing act of we want to keep on making new stuff in the narrative kind of story-wise. We want to keep on making new stuff systems-wise. We want to keep on making new stuff, like, everywhere. And, like,
it's hard to find the time sometimes.
Exactly. It's hard to find the time where, like, if we spent all of our resources on going back and, like, revamping older content, we would never make new content because we'd always find new things to revamp. Yeah. So we want to. It's just a matter of finding the right time to do that doesn't, like, delay new content to, do egregiously. Okay, I think that's a bit of a ramble, but I think that answers that question.
That's okay, that's good.
If you guys like rambling, you're in for a treat because I can do that.
And just a heads up, travelers, we're gonna let him ramble. We're gonna let the lore guy cook. After all, that's kind of what we do on my channel, right? Knowing the game used to start in Chapter 2 in the Ruined Future, I really like the implementation of Chapter 1 that they made, and how it gives us more background information on the world of Eterra, and sets up a lot of the characters in advance, before dumping us straight into the void-ridden future. Kyle was then asked about the timeline spilling over.
Okay, on to the next one. Okay, now for my lore question. Have you guys ever considered timelines spilling over to other timelines? Like Lagan invading Heorot's timeline, for example. Would this be possible or explainable from a lore POV?
I love it.
So, what we kind of have there is, we do have these sort of, like, what-if timelines. Like the, what if Heorot, became tyrannical and attacked other places, which is our Age of Winter timeline. We have a few different timelines in the Monolith like that. We don't have any, like, current, like, plans to have these alternate timelines cross with each other, as opposed to, like, the kind of more standard way of them kind of branching off our kind of main timeline. We don't have anything in concrete there, but that is a kind of, like, story thread I have been thinking about myself for a while. Like I can't get into any kind of details of it, but, like, one of the plans I want to mess with, like, way down the road is very much on that theme of, hey, what if this other timeline that had the resources to do this on their own went and started poaching other timelines and messing with them. So that is something that has been on my mind. It's not something that's in any of the kind of, like, currently being worked on kind of narrative thrusts right now, but it is something that I am very much interested in and down for playing with.
Nice.
So timeline manipulation and what sounds like timeline invasion of some sort is something that's on his mind, but no plans in the near future. Regardless, that's pretty cool. Also, did you guys see Mike almost die to that mage? His face was priceless. Next, we have a question regarding the Weaver. They keep saying Weavers during this answer, but Mike confirmed that it's just Weaver singular. So, the Weaver.
So, next question. Are there plans to expand on the lore of the Weavers, or are they just used for the items? So, I'll just say yes on that and move on.
Probably smart.
Yeah, anything I could say to expand on that would probably be too much, but yes.
Yeah. There's definitely lore around the Weavers. And
there's more plans around the Weavers than there are around the Red Ring of Altaria. I'll say that. Yeah.
It sounds like, based on their response, that we might be getting paid a visit by the Weaver very soon. It seemed as though they were trying to completely prevent any immediate spoilers. Kyle was then asked about the cave painting, the one that we find in the precipice in Chapter 2.
So, next question. In the game, there is a dragon mural with 2 dragons fighting, and I've seen a player with 2 dragon pets assume Kickstarter reward. Hi Joel, are we going to meet these dragons at some point in the Ancient Era? And are one of the dragons named Malatros for the newish Warlock 2-handed sword unique? So, what's the least spoilery way to... So, the Ancient Era does have dragons. There are plans to encounter those dragons. Neither of those dragons is Malatros. I think that's the safest way to answer that question.
Nice.
Malatros is a different dragon than those 2 dragons. But yeah. And, yeah. That's the safest way to do it.
It's tough when you've got plans for a lot of
I
these
know
things
that I
and you
know
don't want to
I know
spoil them.
it's tough. It's harder when I know the answer when I don't.
Yeah.
I absolutely can't wait for more Ancient Era content. It sounds like there were quite a few powerful dragons in the Ancient Era, when they ruled over the skies and lands beyond Eterra's floating temple. Also, is it just me, or does it sound like there's a lot of upcoming lore in the next few cycles? Kyle has been trying really hard not to say or spoil anything on several topics now, which to me says that they're already written or in progress and kind of known conceptually. The next question was regarding Orobyss.
Okay, so for the next question. Oh, I'm halfway through reading it and this is a phone. I'm really interested in the background, source, origin of Orobyss. Is this something that has been explored in game that I may have missed? Or, without getting spoilery, is this something that we might be able to look forward to hearing more about in the future, or is that the past? So, this is another one where the answer is yes. So, there are currently planned 3 more, campaign chapters of, the main campaign, and the origin of Orobyss does come into play within these last 3 chapters. I'm not going to say which one of the last 3 has it, but you do... The origin of Orobyss is a question that is answered by the campaign once we have those last 3 chapters in.
And just a note to add in, a lot of people, I think, shortcut the term, so it ends up being confused by some new players sometimes, is that the boss you fight in the Monolith timelines is the Shade of Orobyss. It's not Orobyss itself.
Yeah, so the Shade of Orobyss, that is a reflection of Orobyss's anguish and despair and anger. It's not Orobyss himself, it's more so just a kind of a twisted reflection of him that's being projected into these timelines from the time he was imprisoned, and, it's the Shades are not Orobyss. So whenever I see someone call the Shades Orobyss, I'm like, we should have named it something slightly different.
Yeah, right?
That is amazing, the Orobyss origin story, and hopefully his true motives will be provided in future chapters. As Kyle explained, we've not yet met the actual Orobyss character yet, only shades of his past selves that are corrupting multiple different timelines. Next up, Kyle was asked about the character class lore. For those of you that played before 1.0, you'll recall the class cinematics for each class as you chose them at character creation. Each individual class used to have its own backstory and cinematic. Now, post 1.0, it's homogenized into a singular traveler's backstory introduction. If you're interested in the cinematics for each class that used to exist, I have recordings for all of them in my class lore video. I'll link that down in the description if you're interested.
Well, character intros come back once they align with the lore better. So...
class-specific character intros, I think, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the class-specific character intros... I don't have a solid answer of a yes or no on there. I will say that fitting the character intros into the spot that they were before would be tricky, just due to we don't want to have you start the game and pick a character and then have to sit for 5 minutes as you go through the shared intro, then the character intro, and then etc. etc. So that space is very much taken by our new intro now, but I do I like our new intro a lot. I love our new intro a lot. It does a lot of really good things for establishing the lore and what is actually going on when you start the game. I do miss the character-specific stories that slot was taken up by, and I do want to do something later on to get those character stories back into the game in some way. I don't think this is spoilerly because it's talking about a plan that didn't happen as opposed to something that we're planning. So part of the Chapter 1 overhaul that didn't quite make it in is, at that same time, we moved the Mastery event from being at the end of Chapter 3 to the end of Chapter 2 because of, the first chapter being longer, maybe we need to move that, forward a bit, just pacing wise. But originally the plan was to also expand that a great deal to where you would actually experience the character backgrounds during the mastery quest, where you'd actually go into the Primalist backstory and play through it partly and then pick your mastery. That ended up just kind of not really being in scope, and also would have, extended the pacing problem of, you have to wait even longer to get your mastery. So we ended up kind of keeping it short and sweet, where you just, talk to Gaspar and pick your mastery. So we, from the get-go of taking those character intros out, we were already talking about a way to kind of get that backstory back in, which just didn't quite pan out just by the nature of scope and wanting to keep the pacing tight on that stretch. So short version is, I would love to get the character backstories back into the game. It would just have to find the right priority and time to do it, and doing it in the right way to where it doesn't like, oh god, I'm still in AOT and I haven't got my mastery yet. I want to start putting paladin points somewhere. So yeah, like it's a tricky thing to kind of thread. So
like some side quest somewhere maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to get those character specific things back in some way that doesn't intrude on people want to get to the end of the campaign and get into Monoliths, ASAP anyways, and anything that kind of delays that is like, do we need that?
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly and have from the launch of 1.0, in that their current intro cinematic sets up the story much better than the individual class stories did. But couldn't they just bring back the class cinematics right now and just make it a toggle option when you create your character as to whether or not you want to see the cinematic? And I mean, as long as the cinematic's skippable, everybody kind of wins in my opinion. Lore should always be opt-in for the most part in these games anyway. The next question was a fun one. Kyle was asked to rank all the powerful beings in and around the world of Eterra, in order from most to least powerful.
What exactly does the power ladder look like with the different gods in Eterra? Are Eterra and Orobyss at the top? Then some unknown ones like Observer, Weaver, Watcher, and then the four lower Majasa, Lagan, Hira, Raya. Where do the Ancient Dragons and Immortal Emperor fit on the power list? Okay, so let's break it down.
Power tier ranking, let's go.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, should we get one of those dumb meme template things where you drag little pictures there? That'd be fun, actually.
That actually would be kind of cool.
That would be a lot of fun. We don't have time to put that together.
No.
That'd be fun, though. Anyway, help illustrate what I'm talking about. Okay, so.
Don't worry, travelers, I've got you. I made a visual tier list.
Bottom up. Okay, so. I would say there is kind of a gray area at the bottom of this kind of tier list, where in the ancient, I would say the ancient era dragons at their full might, and the titans like the stone titan, and these other kind of, other beings in the ancient era, or let's say they all kind of fit into the same kind of ranking at the bottom here, where they're very strong, they are a problem. Them being around is a threat to humans being able to, live and progress in the ancient era and get to the divine era. Like, they're all very strong. The four gods, Majasa, Lagan, Hira, and Raya, they are above them, but still, wouldn't be able to take them out super easily. The gods are definitely, there to kind of make it so that humans can deal with the ancient era dragons and the titans and be able to kind of establish their foothold in the world and progress and everything. And I would say the Immortal Emperor would be just above the four gods, just by the nature of him, stealing their power and killing them between the Divine Era and the Imperial eras. So, and that itself is kind of has a bit of a, a spectrum there, because the Immortal Emperor at his peak, just, freshly having taken the power of all the gods, it would have absolutely been stronger than all of them. And it's a little murkier towards the end of the Imperial Era, where that power is kind of rotted and waned inside of him, but he's still, I would say, a notch above the four Divine Era gods, just by the nature of he took their powers. They are, they're in him, so he's, inherently a bit above them. And then, so we're at the third kind of tier there with the Immortal Emperor, and right below him the Divine Era gods, and then right below that the Titans and the Ancient Era dragons. So at the top, above all that, is Eterra and the Observer, and yeah, the Eterra and the Observer right on top of there, and I'm trying to remember something real quick. It's something that's been revealed on. But yeah, so yeah, like Orobyss, Eterra, those are on the top above everything else. The Divine Era Gods, the Mortal Emperor, so it would be like Eterra and Orobyss, with Orobyss being a little bit above, then the Mortal Emperor a good chunk below, and then right below Mortal Emperor would be the Divine Era Gods. Then below them would be the Dragons and Titans. Man, maybe we should have gone the tier maker thing.
I was trying, and I'm like, I've never used this website before.
Yeah,
There's ads everywhere. How do I do this?
Oh no! Okay.
Someone can like take if anyone wants to make a version of that, I'll post it next stream.
And I'll fact check it for you.
Yeah.
I posted my visual to Mike in Discord, so maybe it'll be shown on next stream. That would be pretty awesome. The next question is on the Shards of the Epoch.
Okay, so next question. In the Ruined Era, we loot 3 purple shards as part of the Epoch, but the end cinematic only shows 2. Considering the in-game shards 1 and 2 look the same, is that a part of the lore or just an oopsie? Okay, that's another question after that one. Okay, so in the Ruined Era, you already have 1 and 2, and you're getting the last one in the temple. So you had 2, and you're getting that last piece. So I believe, if I remember the cinematic correctly, yeah, the first you have already combined, and you're getting that last piece to kind of complete the whole set. So yeah, you should. There are 3 parts, and you have 2 of them, and you get that last one in the temple.
2 of them are just already put together, but they're just put together so well that it looks like one piece.
Yeah, and it's real.
The commonly misinterpreted thing about the Epoch is that it's really only 2 shards and a centerpiece. Think of the 2 shards like the batteries powering the device, and the actual centerpiece is how you dial it in and use it functionally. And now a question on the Void.
Alright, next question. Is the Void a byproduct of using the Epoch or time travel? It does only really appear after the Epoch starts being used and is similarly coveted by Void entities. Also, the only Void class, Void Knight, is really the only class that has time travel abilities. So, I would say it's less a byproduct of the Epoch and time travel, and more so that they are very inseparable. It's less one creating the other, and more so them being part of the same power source. Like the power of, time travel and the Epoch, it has a very similar origin as the Void. They are very connected in that sense. So it's less about one being the byproduct of the other, and more so them being part of the same power.
The Void and the Epoch are part of the same power source. That's really interesting. Did Eterra manage to filter out the Void in her technology? The next question was about Majasa and why she's not a Monolith boss.
Okay, next question. Mike has also said a few times that Majasa isn't going to be a Monolith boss because of story reasons. What is the story reason?
I never know how to answer that part of the question.
So, it's because she seems to be the only one that needs it. So, I hate to contradict Mike, but it's less...
You told me this!
Did I?
Yeah!
I don't think... I
could be wrong. I'll take the hit on this one. Go ahead.
There's no reason Majasa couldn't be a Monolith boss. Like, we have Lagan as a Monolith boss, and we have Herod as a Monolith boss. It's really just a, we don't want to have... We've talked about adding more timelines to the Monolith. Like, we have 10 right now. But, whenever we bring up that idea, like, maybe, in this patch cycle we could add... an extra timeline or 2, it kind of, ends up going, well, 10's actually, we don't want to go much higher than that as far as more timelines go, because that would kind of extend out the kind of in-game progression, like, it would make it even longer to get to empowered monoliths, which, that's a bit of friction we're not sure that we want to make more friction-y. Not sure we want to increase the grit on that sandpaper. So,
yeah.
One thing that we've talked about in the past...
the grit, though, wouldn't it?
I don't work with wood enough to know if I use that analogy correctly. Yeah, we don't know we want to increase the grit. Whichever. I need to make someone with wood before I'm making sandpaper puns.
Lower grit's rougher, higher grit's smoother.
Mike, could you make me something?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Just make me just a block of wood. Sanded to perfection. Anyways, What's the question again? Okay, so yeah, there's no explicit lore reason why Majasa isn't a monolith boss, but Lagan and Hera are. It's more so we've talked about adding extra timelines to the monolith. We've kind of said no to that just we don't want to make the grind to get them powered any longer. One thing we talked about in the past, and we haven't talked about super recently, is the idea of like swapping out certain timelines for new ones for certain like cycles or certain patches. Like let's say let's take the Lagan one and place it with the Majasa one for like a patch or two. We've talked about stuff like that, though we've never really kind of like bitten the bullet on it. So like yeah, unless I'm forgetting something horribly, there's no real story reason why Majasa can't be a monolith boss. It's more so, do we want to add an extra timeline? Not this patch. Do we want to swap out a timeline? Not this patch. And just kind of, landed on that side of that question, or up till now. Or
I apologize to everyone I said that to, which is a lot of people.
I apologize for past me who might have said something like that, because I cannot remember. If I did, I do not remember at all why I would have said that.
Yeah, no worries.
Anyways.
It sounds like the gameplay design doesn't allow for expanding on the monolith timelines too much. They want the amount of monolith timelines to stay around 10, otherwise it'd be kind of a grind to get to empowered and so on. They'll have to find another creative way to give us more insights into Majasa. Next up is another fun one, about the weapons of the Divines.
Okay, next question. Hera has a spear, what are the other gods' weapons? So, Hera is actually fairly unique in this case. He didn't always have that spear. That spear is something that he crafted later on in when he was having to deal with Mortitus, his son, and when Mortitus rebelled, and he made that in conjunction with the other gods. So one of the gods having a weapon like that is actually something that is unusual compared to the others. So Hera is unique in that sense that he has that spear, and some could say that actually gonna makes him closer to humanity, which can be seen as a negative. Say Raya would look down on Hera for having a spear and feeling the need to use a weapon as opposed to this their own power. Like Raya, for example, would look down on Hera for having to use a weapon. So Hera is the only one that has a weapon, and that's because he didn't start with it. He created it for a purpose, and that was to imprison Mortitus, who rebelled against him.
I had no idea that the spear was crafted with the aid of the other gods, nor did I have any idea that it was made with the sole purpose of taking down Mortitas. Heorot's concept art usually displays him proudly with his spear, like it was part of his identity and strength. My follow-up question to this information, in order to find out more on who the Emperor might be, would be if the lance needed to be fully empowered to stop Mortitas before. Speaking of which, here's the next question.
Okay. Settle it once and for all. Is the Immortal Emperor Grail or Mortitus? I'm not going to settle it once and for all. Moving on. I hate to be that guy, but I'm going to refrain from... You'll find out by the...
Yeah, I was going to say, let's rephrase the question. Will you ever settle this?
Yes. It is an actual answered, known thing. It's been a known thing since the inception of the character, but the players will get that reveal of who the Immortal Emperor was before he was the Immortal Emperor within one of the next 3 campaign chapters.
Beautiful.
Soon, travelers, the answer's coming soon. It's really interesting to me that he confirmed it's been known since the character's inception, because there's been a lot of speculation lately that who it was intended to be has pivoted recently. People used to believe that it was Mortitas, and then recently it became solely Grail, like everybody thinks Grail. But I'm not too sure yet. The next question is regarding unique items and their lore.
Next question. Are we ever going to meet some of the other NPCs that Uniques are named after, like Artor or Fairboar, Isadora, etc.? I'll say yes, and yes on some, potentially later for others. It's one of those things where, when we want to introduce a new NPC for a new system or just a new part of the game, we have this big treasure trove of NPCs reference to uniques that we can just dive into and go, okay, what do you want to do with this? What story on here do you want to expand on? So nothing, I don't want to say any of those are set in stone, but whenever we add new stuff, like it's very likely that we'll dip into those and mess with them a bit. So I want to do some with Artor as well, and yeah, like it's a non-committal probably.
And I think this is also important to note that some of the names that appear on items are like supporters and backers who have like their gamer handle in there or their real name in there in some cases too. So it's
The odds of meeting Aaron the Golemancer are low, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Due the name, defend the name Aaron's. It's very explicitly a dude.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. Yeah, there's a few of them that are probably won't be.
It seems like we said before, 80% of these uniques are just placeholder and allow room for lore expansion in the future. Also, it's really cool that a lot of the names are the backers that made them. The next question is regarding Isadora.
Alright, next question. Is Isadora a vampire? With a stake they killed her and silver they bound her. So, I'm not sure I want to use the explicit term vampire, because we haven't dipped into that kind of, part of the lore too deep yet. But I will say that the Immortal Empire did not invent necromancy. Before the Immortal Empire, necromancy was a thing throughout the Divine Era and even earlier in the Ancient Era. By someone mentioned Maltros the dragon earlier. That's referenced on one of the Warlock uniques. That's an example of the fact that even back in the Ancient Era, certain powerful dragons could dip into necromancy as a type of magic they could mess with. There are vampire-like undead hiding in the shadows in different eras that there's a source for where the Acolyte learned her dark arts in the Divine Era, for example. So the Immortal Empire doesn't have a monopoly on undead stuff. It's just that the undead stuff kind of had to be way more in the shadows until the Immortal Empire came and made it very, normalized and accepted throughout the world. So vampires exist even if whenever we, go all out and introduce them, we call them something different.
For a bit of background, this question is in regards to the Isadora's Revenge set. The item in particular is the belt, Isadora's Tomb Binding, and its flavor text. With a stake they slew her, and with silver they bound her. So Isadora was not a vampire, but was punished for practicing necromancy, which seemingly only infuriated her and sent her over the rails completely. This confirms that necrotic arts and magic has existed throughout Eterra for quite a while. The Immortal Emperor just kind of took things to the next level and defied life itself while maintaining consciousness. This next question was regarding the Exiled Mages.
So, next question. Who or what exiled the Exiled Mages in the prisons? So, the Exiled Mages were concepted around the same time that we were really getting deep into the Rune Master, creation and, really fleshing them out. The ones who exiled the Exiled Mages are certain very powerful Rune Masters that at least started out as being associated with Warwind, but have kind of gone out and kind of started doing their own thing. They are a side of the lore that, I want to dip into more as time goes on, but pretty much the Rune Masters and Welrin were experimenting with time travel, honestly, experimenting with trying to, dip into the same kind of research that Jorah was doing down in, down in the south of Majasa, and they're kind of where they kind of hit their brick wall with that. It was making these little prisons that would send a person one way to somewhere that they didn't quite know where they'd end up, but they couldn't come back. So with, their kind of failed attempt at making time travel really just resulting in a box you stuff someone in and they go somewhere and never come back. Hey, we can use this to get rid of people we don't like. So they started just using that as a way to exile dangerous mages that they didn't want to just stuff into a prison or kick out of their, cool mage club, and just, hey, we dislike you enough or think you're dangerous, we want you to go somewhere and never come back. So they stuff them into these prisons and activate them, and they just get sent off somewhere random in time and place and stay trapped, never to come back again. Until, random traveler, knocks on it, and then whoopsie, here's a insane mage breaking out who's been trapped in there for who knows how long. But I want to dip into these rune masters who made these prisons more later in the future in some sort of like side system. So yeah, I want to do some more cool stuff there, but yeah, like Wizards found a way to make a go away forever box and did that to people who didn't like, typically other mages. So yeah.
The rogue rune masters that were found to be twisting the arcane arts were banished in these rune prisons. A one-way trip to a random point in time. I can't wait for more lore on the first rune masters, how they learned to harness the power of these runes, and began to explore these other means of time manipulation. Kyle was asked about each different timeline containing a different epoch device.
Alright, next question. Does each timeline have its own epoch? And the trailer shows multiple player characters at Eterra's temple. The Traveler has failed in other timelines and are killed in the Void Winds. Are those the timelines we are correcting? So, I will say that, yeah, every alternate Traveler, aka like every like other player in the game, does have their own epoch just by nature of, how every player is going through that, the timeline like that. But as of yet, every timeline ends in the Ruined Era with, a dead failed Traveler and, the epoch kind of not really amounting to anything. But, maybe you, the player, will be, the Traveler who doesn't die and saves the reality in Eterra with the epoch. Maybe you are the one who will finally defeat Orobyss, as long as you keep on playing and you stay strong and you are the hero. So, I got real too into the whole pointing at the camera gimmick. Let me rethink if I actually answered the question. Yeah, I think I answered the question. But yes, other Travelers have the epoch, but all Travelers up till now have failed and the Ruined Era happens. But the story might be the story about the Traveler who avoids that fate. It might be you.
Also, I'll add in the lore behind where our past selves end up when we die. Every death essentially releases a shade of that particular player in that particular timeline. Gaspar helps guide the shades of those past selves to you, in order to empower your abilities and your chosen mastery. That's how death in game and the shades in multiple different timelines kind of converge. With every death, you get stronger, so to speak. Next up, some insights on the Titans.
Anyways, next question. How many other Titans are there? You were very specific to say Stone Titan. So Stone Titan is the mountain beneath the boss of the Liath Arbor. I still just call him Stone Titan just due to like early dev name, and just that's the name that's been lodged into my gray matter. So I can't really put a hard number to how many Titans there are. The term Titan really just applies to this kind of class of creature, of being, of monster that kind of became ubiquitous with the Ancient Era. The Ancient Era has a lot of these big, huge creatures, and part of the transition from the Ancient Era to the Divine Era and humanity and the gods kind of taking their place in the world is humanity and the gods clearing out the Titans and the dragons so that, humanity could make towns and actually survive long enough to get civilization going without having to be afraid of getting stomped by a big stone monster or being eaten by a big crystal worm or, getting, wrapped up in webs by some kind of big spider. Like, the Titans are a classification of giant Ancient Era monster that had to be taken care of before humanity could really get its, get its momentum going. And the Stone Titan is notable for being, like, as far as anyone knows, the only Titan to survive all the way to the Ruined Era just by, like, slumbering down, like, in an underground cave for so long.
When Eterra's tower fell and she disappeared, the humans were essentially left to fend for themselves on the ground level, containing dragons, titans, and fierce creatures. The humans needed help from the gods that they chose to worship and follow, to clear out both the titans, dragons, and otherwise, to make the ground level inhabitable. The next question is regarding the gods granting immortality to others.
Next question. The gods are able to impart immortality to others, like Mortitus, or like Lagan when he says he controls Liath's life as well. Is this immortality connected to how the Immortal Emperor has extended it to all the skeletons? Yes, so one of the kind of hallmarks of like divine power and divinity is its ability to extend out the lifespan of someone, extend out, prevent death, and make people live far, beyond, their normal lifespan, to be able to come back and stick around. That, like, Liath is hundreds of years old, in fact, and the Immortal Emperor and his ability to, raise the dead in mass and keep them around for long time is very much connected to the fact that he has stolen the power of, all the Divine Era gods. So, a big old yes.
Being chosen by the gods seems to be both a blessing and a curse, and it also depends on which god chooses you. Heorot loved his son and his people, but he was betrayed by his own son, Mortitas. Majasa's daughters, the Vessel Maidens, are raised and consumed by Majasa to just extend her lifetime further. The maidens are simply a means to an end. Liath has to organize and maintain Lagon's entire domain, as he refuses to do it himself. She protects her people by satiating Lagon's tantrums, in an attempt to prevent him from washing away everything that she has worked so hard to build. Liath's life was saved by Lagon, but to what end? She's now just his servant, his babysitter. I'm not too sure about Rye, or if he has a chosen, maybe Orion, but I can't imagine that he treats his chosen any better either. So almost every god but Heorot would not be very fortunate to be chosen by. And the rest of the creatures on Eterra are just pawns to them, including and especially humans. Kyle then answered a question on how the gods sustain themselves and how they live forever.
When we go get Heorot's spear, Mortitas seemingly being sustained by the spear. There are also what looks like soul jars there as well. Are the gods sustaining themselves in a similar way through soul jars, or is this just for Mortitas? Or are they immortal in their own way, only killable by another god? So there are kind of multiple questions going on here. So the people being sustained in the frozen roots in the Tomb of Mortitas, those aren't connected to sustaining Mortitas. Those are actually just other humans who rebelled alongside Mortitas. So, and Heorot froze them there to kind of keep them imprisoned without killing them. And Heorot's spear is kind of what's keeping Mortitas in stasis and keeping him imprisoned there. And their immortality there is another kind of reflection of how the gods can impart immortality, but through Heorot being kind of a little misguided in his sense of mercy. One of the things that kind of brought Heorot into conflict with Raya is that Heorot asked for help from the other gods in making the spear in order to deal with his son Mortitas, who rebelled, and Raya was very much on the camp of, hey, okay, I'll help you with this problem because you're too weak to solve it yourself, but you gotta make sure to kill that guy so the problem's solved. And Heorot didn't. Heorot kept Mortitas imprisoned in the Tomb of Mortitas with the spear, keeping him, imprisoned and in stasis rather than dead. And Raya saw that as a sign of weakness from Heorot. And it could be arguable whether Heorot was being merciful or naive or weak or kind. It depends on how you read that. But yeah, he had Mortitas frozen and imprisoned there rather than killing him. And he did the same. He did the same to a bunch of Mortitas' followers who were also imprisoned in that tree. And I hope that answers the question. I kind of got into the weeds, kind of talking about what does Raya think about this guy who wasn't even in the question. But Raya would be happy with that. He likes being important. Next question.
His personality's coming through just in this.
Yeah, Raya is very judgmental and very. But anyways, I've had some future chapters in mind lately, so that's kind of coming up.
We learn more on the pasts of the gods. They seemingly used to work together and maintain their own domains. Heorot's sparing of his son Mortitas and his followers was seen as a weakness by Raya. This question answer took a turn, but provided some great insights on Raya. The next question is the player Orobyss.
Earlier you had said the Epoch and the Void were connected. Is Orobyss just a future/alternate version of ourselves that was corrupted by the Void or the Epoch? I'll go ahead and say I'm tempted to do the whole you'll have to find out thing, but I will say that the player is not Orobyss. I can say that confidently. I'm not gonna say more details on, Orobyss'
We're not just straight up
origin.
copying Diablo 1's plot.
No. Yeah, like I like to avoid spoilers. They're gonna keep some mystery around things, but I can say, without too much worry, the player is not Orobyss.
This has been a running theory for a while, albeit kind of a wild one, but we're definitively confirmed to not be Orobyss. We're not from the future, and we're not fighting ourselves, so that's good. Next up, we get more insights on the Weaver. Interestingly, he keeps calling the Weaver her. That's news to me.
Back to the power ladder. Let's get on that ladder and power on. Where does the Weaver fit in this? Oh, the power ladder. Fit in that kind of power ladder. I thought we were talking about like bounce or something. Okay, where does the Weaver fit in this space? What are her powers besides making items that can never roll properly? Well, the Weaver is an interesting example, and she has a connection to. She's a special case, and we'll be able to talk more about her sometime in the future. I will say that she is above the. I'll say that due to stuff, she is above the gods, but not above Orobyss. So yeah, I think that's probably the most comfortable place I can say.
Love it.
The name Weaver in itself implies some kind of manipulator or organizer of time or the timelines. Kyle expands on the addition of more gods or minor gods in the future.
Alright, next question. Considering the 4 gods have a set deviation from the cardinal points, would it be possible to assume that maybe some minor gods or half-siblings could arise at the intercardinal points? So, I will say that the intercardinal points aren't an explicit slot for other gods to exist in, but there are some minor gods and other kind of beings that are have a similar kind of relation to the gods that some are missing, some just haven't been important enough for the story to really touch on them before. There are other continents besides the one you see in the game as well. There is a lot more room for gods and minor gods than just our main 4. It's just that our main 4 are the most important ones for the game's story and the continent that the game takes place in. So there is room for these other kind of minor divine figures. It just, I wouldn't say that they are explicitly tied to the cardinal points or intercardinal points. So yeah, there's room for some minor divine figures to come up in the story as well.
It sounds like we'll definitely be seeing more gods and minor gods in the future. He also confirms that there are other gods that exist, but that their stories weren't relevant quite yet in comparison to the main 4. I am absolutely all for building out the Pantheon. Next up, and kind of related to this one, Kyle talks about the children of the gods.
You said Monoliths was Heorot's son. Are there other children of the gods out and about? The main other example of that would be the fact that Apophis is technically the daughter of Majasa, and every vessel mating before her was also a daughter of Majasa. That's the main other example of children of the gods. That is not to say that I would say that yeah, Majasa and Heorot would be the only ones interested in Heorot's case, interested in humanity enough to have a child, and in Majasa's case, interested in her own kind of continuing her own power and presence to have a child via these vessel maidens. Lagan would be too much in his own just kind of domain, just causing storms to entertain himself and not really thinking outside of himself enough to try and go and have a child. And Raya is far too arrogant and narcissistic to want to give up any of his power in that sense. So I would say, yeah, the only notable ones would be Immortality on Heorot's side and Apophis on Majasa's side.
Nice.
Liath is mostly Lagan's caretaker. Kyle explains further on this topic later in the interview. Here's that clip.
My eye just drifted to the chat and saw a response to the my answer about the children of the gods, saying that from Inspector Liath is kind of like an adopted child of Lagan, whether or not Lagan would recognize or agree. That's actually a very good insight there. That's actually a very good example. Liath could be considered an adopted daughter of Lagan, but in the sense of, oh, I have to go do the taxes for my dad because he can't be asked to do it himself, and oh, I need to go, mow his lawn because he won't stop looking at it, his figurine collection to go mow it himself. So Liath isn't happy about it, but Liath could be considered an adopted child of Lagan. That's actually I hadn't considered that exact perspective of it. So actually, yeah, I like that a lot. That's actually a very good point, very good example. Yeah.
The next question was on adding boss dialogue and voice lines to the chat log.
Next question. Any plans to add boss voice lines in chat during the fight? Notice it with Lagan, and to me is quite enjoyable and more immersive. Yes, actually, we did a big pass on adding those kind of those chat lines for bosses, right in the kind of run up to 1.0. Any spots where we missed that, we do plan to go back and hit that there, and we want that to continue to kind of be a standard of the system going forward. So really it's kind of a matter of kind of going back and seeing the spots we missed on that. But yeah, as a standard thing for all future bosses, we're going to try and have those chat lines for the VA lines, because yeah, we are very happy with how that came together. It's just a matter of kind of hitting those holes we missed and making sure it stays part of the kind of implementation standards.
Yeah.
I noticed this in 1.0 with Lagan and the Emperor, as well as many others, which was really awesome. It definitely increases accessibility for the lore, so I'm all for it. Kyle answers a question on the gods and their true power source.
You called Hero the god of winter. Are the other gods also seasonal? Do they wax and wane in power? So, I wouldn't say it's a cool concept. They don't really wax or wane in power like that with seasons. They are associated with, they have some kind of connections to aspects of the world and nature, but nothing as quite explicit. This is the fall god, this is the spring god. But Hirot has domain over the north and cold and stuff, and that kind of naturally aligns with winter. Raya could be argued is aligned with summer and the hottest parts of the of the year, but it's not that he gets stronger in summer. It's just that as a god with a domain over fire, he naturally has a is associated with summer. And Majasa could be associated with spring due to her kind of themes of kind of rejuvenating herself and regrowth, even though she's in a desert. So the god of winter would be less something that is, the God of Winter title is less from Hirot's perspective and more from his followers' perspective. From Hirot's perspective, it'd be more so God of, this region and these people, and God of, ice and cold and strength. The winter is going to be more something that others would put on him as opposed to something actually intrinsic to him and his power. So I would say his power is more fundamental than winter, I should say.
More fundamental than winter. That's a.
I mean, in the sense that it's more to do with ice and cold than the actual time of year.
It just had a weird ring to it, but I liked that thought.
Thank you.
So not quite seasonal. They more so choose their domains, and their biome within Eterra is kind of representative of their power. In that same vein, the next question was regarding where the players get their power from.
Okay. Next question, is it ever explained where the players get their powers from? Depends on what kind of powers you're talking about. If you're talking about being able to travel through time, that's from the Shards of the Epoch. You get, and that just becomes more the case as you get all the shards and complete, reform the Epoch. If you're talking about their powers as in the skills and everything, that is by the nature of their backgrounds. The Sentinel, for example, again, this is one of the kind of the downsides of us taking out the character specific intros in favor of the shared intro. But the Sentinel's backstory is that he was a former soldier of Raya who, once he saw the destruction that attacking Hyboria was causing, decided to defect and fight against Raya after all. So his powers and abilities at the very beginning, are very much in line with being a Raya soldier, and as he advances, he gets stronger. He either, leans into his background more and becomes a Forge Guard, or he starts giving into, the power of the void he's seen from being in the Ruined Era and becomes a Void Knight, or he starts to hold on to his own willpower and hope and start to kind of forge a new path like what Raya should have been and becomes a paladin. And the same thing can be said of, the other, classes. Their powers are from their backgrounds and where they decide to take them, and the kind of shades of alternate thems that went down these other paths that they embrace whenever they make that mastery choice with Gaspar. So I hope that answered the question.
Wonderful.
And also from you, clicking the buttons and, assigning the skills.
The real power comes from the strength within.
The power comes from you.
The true power is in the friends we find along the way. Am I right? Again, if you're interested in any of the player characters' backstories, the link for my lore overview of all the classes and masteries can be found down in the description. Unfortunately, I joined the stream a bit late though. I was in the middle of work, but I started getting my questions submitted on stream, and this was one of the first ones that Kyle answered, but I phrased it kind of poorly.
Okay, on to the next question. Is Balthas still alive in the Ruined Era? Well, I will say he's not dead in the Ruined Era. So to actually answer the question a bit, this isn't a spoiler because it is like content that is in the game right now. So after Chapter 1, where Balthas, takes the Shards and, sends you to the Ruined Era and he disappears, as you go into Last Refuge and get into the the last archives of the kind of library area right after the council chambers, you can find lore notes written by Last Refuge's first elder. And if you read them, it sounds very similar and is voice acted by the same person who voice acted Balthas. And at the end of those little lore notes in the last archive, talking about how the first elder founded Last Refuge after he appeared in the Ruined Era outside of his own will, he found out they had to leave and left Last Refuge behind, knowing that it'd be in good hands. So Balthas is somewhere. He is not dead yet.
Not dead yet.
He's old. He's not that old.
Sweet.
So obviously I'd already known about Keeper Balthas being the first elder. He established the Order of Elders in Last Refuge. What I was kind of after with this question was whether or not he was still alive and had just left Last Refuge, and if the final record of the first elder was his last will and testament.
If you read this, I am gone. Keep Last Refuge safe. Fight off the void. Do not succumb to despair. I trust you all. You are my people, which is why I must go. May Eterra protect you all.
The way the dialogue is said, it sounded to me like he was almost dying possibly. But Kyle confirmed it. Balthas had just left Last Refuge to do who knows what in the Ruined Era. I'm excited to rejoin Balthas and see what he's been up to. I then asked about retcons with act updates, and he answered that one too.
Will the past act see an update? Will there be any retcons that you foresee? So, there's nothing set in stone for when we'll update past acts. I will say that the area that is going to very most likely be targeted whenever we do go and update a past act would be going through chapters 4, 5, and 6 and upping those in quality. Those right now are the oldest parts of content in the game as far as what's been updated or not, because chapters 1, 2, and 3 have seen updates far more recently than 4, 5, and 6 have. 4, 5, and 6 did get a very good... actually, yeah, that's a little bit out of date, actually, because from a level design and enemy perspective, 4, 5, and 6, the entire Imperial Era stretch, did get a really good makeover, looks-wise and enemy-wise. So those have been updated. So those are in a better state than they used to be. But as far as quest design and just events happening in those scenes, those are the ones I still want to target the most out of all of our currently existing chapters. You meet the Outcasts and the Outcast Queen early on, and you kind of don't really interact with them that much afterwards. You're really just gonna tag along with Alric for the majority of your time in the Pillar era. That's something I wouldn't call that a retcon. I would more so call it a kind of rework or expansion of events there. That's one thing that I personally want to go back and kind of improve the most as far as our existing story goes, is going to that Imperial era stretch and making the Outcast and the Outcast Queen matter more, and have, on top of just having the player just do more stuff in those scenes, in those chapters, because like the quest and event design for chapters 4, 5, and 6 is absolutely our oldest at the point. You are kind of going in a straight line for a long stretch of there. So yeah, that's the part I want to go back and, update the most. But again, that kind of is constantly at odds with like making new content, making new systems, stuff like that. So there's really no like set in stone kind of plan on when we would update those. But yeah, I would love to go back and make it to where like the Outcasts are actually a faction people can like recognize and feel attached to, and feel like they're actually part of the game's world, as opposed to this little like pit stop you see for a second and then it's the Ulrich show. He is handsome though, people love him. I love him.
Ulrich is pretty handsome. I wish I had a cool accent. Any potential reworks to the acts that they do have planned sound amazing. Chapters 4, 5, and 6 have a lot of potential to expand on. But most importantly, it sounds like they plan to be delicate, if not completely avoid retcons. So that's good news for me, good news for my channel, and good news for all of you. The next question involves the Acolyte's necrotic magic.
Why are the people in the Outcast camp totally cool with my necromancer walking through the camp while being at war with the Emperor? That is...
Good question.
Actually, yeah, it is a good question. It kind of, interacts with a couple of questions we had before. Just a minute ago, I was talking about how I would love to update that entire stretch of the game with the Outcasts and the Outcast camp, 4, 5, and 6. I would love to update those, and one thing that'd be great to do there is play around with the game recognizing your class a bit more. I would love it to where if we update that, the NPCs would actually be way less friendly to you if you're an acolyte, and have different dialogue that's way more standoffish and way more kind of hey, we're watching you. You
best not step out of line.
Exactly. Because, and kind of dipping on another thing, in the Imperial era, yes, undead are very much, generally associated with the Immortal Empire. Before the Imperial era, there was necromancy that was just kind of more hidden and more kind of in the shadows because they, weren't, accepted. The Acolyte could be, seen as, okay, they are a hedged necromancer, not associated with the Empire, that's, using, necromancy to fight against the Immortal Empire as well. Again, part of updating that stretch is what I'd love to have an actual kind of beat where the Outcasts aren't sure about you and you need to kind of prove yourself to them besides just talking to the Outcast Queen off the bat. So that is one of those kind of weaknesses in the presentation of Outcast that I would love to go back and improve if we were to ever revamp those Imperial era chapters.
Nice.
Having the characters react to your class and its class fantasy would be super immersive and fun. It sounds like they're open to the idea and might explore it with future chapter updates. The next question was on Chronowyrms.
What exactly is a Chronowyrm and what does it do in the ecosystem? So, the End of Time is kind of this outside of the world space where, reality has been almost completely eaten away by the void and there's not much left besides these kind of floating debris. So, outside of the world, there is life as well, and the main example of that are these Chronowyrms. The Chronowyrms are essentially the native life, the native creatures of this space outside of reality that's left when the void is eating away everything else. And they act as kind of scavengers for this kind of detritus of these dead timelines, eating the kind of floating fragments that are left over. So they are a native, natural creature that lives in this space outside of everything, that are just gonna having a good buffet, a good meal with all these dead timeline fragments that Orobyss is creating from erasing everything. It could be argued that Chronowyrms are aliens. I wouldn't use that term personally, but it could be argued.
I also happen to have a video on the Chronowyrms if you're interested. I'll be sure to link that in the description as well. It goes over Elder Panion's noted observations on the Chronowyrms, and I also go over every known type of Chronowyrm and how they develop. Next up is a question regarding Liath's mechanical arms.
What exactly are Liath's arms? Are they pure mechanical, or similar to the gold and silver elementals? So it's they're more mechanical. I will say that she powers them with magic get from Lagan. It's not like just pure pneumatics and pistons and steam and stuff. There is magic powering it. That's one of the kind of hallmarks of any of the kind of technology you see in the Divine Era. Like you see like the Solarum constructs, those little kind of walking spider things, and the siege golems. Those are mainly mechanical, but they are powered by magic, powered by fire magic. The same thing's going on with Liath's arms and her contraptions. They are mechanical in nature, but they are, rather than being powered by steam or coal or anything, it's powered by lightning magic in her case, magic from Lagan. So, and the gold and silver elementals are a similar case, but kind of more veered towards the magic side of things. They don't have as much mechanical things going on, but they are a similar kind of inanimate object animated with magic, just with less kind of mechanical complexity compared to Liath's constructs. So, short version is, it's kind of a spectrum, with Liath's arms being way more on the mechanical side, but they both share that kind of inanimate object powered by magic kind of, spectrum.
So not fully steampunk. A lot of the machinery and technology we see throughout the game is directly powered by the magic of that god. Have you ever been curious about who's narrating the cutscenes? Me too. Let's see what Kyle says.
Question. Who is narrating the cutscenes? Is it Gaspar? It is not Gaspar. It is the Observer, and I'm going to leave the question there.
Almost a little mean, but yeah, it's good.
I'm not being mean, I'm being direct. Okay, so it is not Gaspar. The person narrating the cutscenes is the character known as the Observer, who you see in that first kind of intro cutscene. And you'll learn more about their deal in the upcoming campaign chapters.
Okay, so this is huge. I originally thought the being shown in the intro cinematic was Orobyss, and that the narration of the story so far was from their perspective. I also thought Orobyss and Eterra once shared the Epoch, also due to the intro cinematic, where Eterra can be shown reaching out for the Epoch. But that might not be true either. Eterra may have stolen the Epoch from this new character called the Observer. It sounds like we'll find out all about that and more in future chapters. I absolutely cannot wait. Kyle then answered another one of my questions regarding the accessibility of the lore.
What are the team's plans to make the lore more accessible to the community as a whole? Recordings that play while moving rather than standing still, etc.? That's a very good question. We want to do everything we can to kind of improve our presentation on that front. It's one of the just kind of like hallmarks of being a team that started out very small with people who kind of never made a game before and just kind of building on this railroad track as it's running in front of us for so many years.
I'm always reminded of Wallace and Gromit. You know, they're like
exactly
dropping down the train tracks.
Exactly. We've been talking about a system called Lore Collectibles for, I think, over a year now, maybe 2 years at this point. Very much hitting that kind of niche of, these recordings that play while you walk around instead of a standing still conversation, and make it to where you would interact with these and they would go into a whole UI section that can let you revisit them later on whenever you wanted to go and look back over them. As I'm sure people noticed, there are these lore notes throughout the game now. They started popping up around when we introduced the Chapter 1 overhaul. Those are actually the kind of, I won't say placeholder, but just the, early version of getting this lore collectible system kind of going. We just have not had the bandwidth to be able to kind of hit that kind of idealized plan for them where they can play while you're walking around. They're stored somewhere in your like UI with a new element they can go back to replay them. Like, so it's something that we want to do more of and better. It's just we've always got a million things to do like that are more pressing than something like that. So it's on our list. It's one of those that's on the list.
Yep.
On the list is better than not on the list. I definitely know they have a lot on their plate, and that lore is kind of low down on the totem pole. It's mostly about the combat and systems. Completely understandable. I would be all for this. Not only having them in the game, but having some kind of archive of the lore collectibles that you've gathered. He then gave some insights on Keeper Balthas.
Will we see Keeper Balthas again? Maybe. Not gonna go into more details on that. I do want to bring him back for some of the kind of like, you know, stuff that happens later. So I do. There are plans to bring him back. Yes, he's not. The intent isn't for him to just disappear entirely. There is a theme, a soft theme kind of going on with, you know, we have a Gaspar and a Balthas, and I want to get them into the same room at some point. Maybe with a third person that hasn't been met yet.
They're gonna form a band, a rock band, and no.
I would love that. Can we do like a rock and roll cycle? Like introduce like a guitar. I mean, Fortnite has a Guitar Hero. Why can't we have Guitar Hero?
Yeah, right. Loot Hero.
Yes.
What would you name the band of Keeper Balthas and Elder Gaspar? Let me know down in the comments. The next question is on the gods' influence over our abilities.
Alright, next question. If the gods influence the player's abilities, what are your thoughts on other entities giving the player power in the future? I mean, you guys have found those Weaver items, Weaver Will items. I mean, that power's coming from somewhere. The Void Knight has power, you know, from the Void. So it's not just the gods that are the source of power for players. Like, the Primalist, for example, is like, you know, pulls a lot of his power from nature itself and animals and like the land and weather and everything. And like, while there's a lot of overlap with the gods in that, it's not entirely the gods supplying that power. The mage, like, there's like, you know, touching on similar stuff as the gods, but like the mage isn't like mainlining power from the gods by any means. So yeah, the players do get, you know, like power from other sources than the gods.
Simple enough. We already derive power from several different sources, not primarily the gods. Kyle's answer to the next question is interesting.
Next question. Is the Imperial Era Seer a former keeper, maybe Leena? Yeah, the Outcast Seer that's in the Risen Lake, she is not Leena. Whenever we do have Leena show back up, it will be obvious that she's Leena, that it is Leena. The Outcast Seer isn't Leena, but she is one of the last keepers that have kind of, you know, survived. I don't want to say survived into the Imperial Era, because that implies like, no, she was alive in the Divine Era. More so, the keepers as an organization kept on being a thing after the events in Chapter 1. And yeah, the Outcast Seer is one of the kind of last keepers, and the keepers essentially going to help form the kind of initial foundation of the Outcasts. So that answers that one.
Who do you think the Outcast Seer we meet in the Imperial Era was? They stated that they used to be a keeper. This is something that I was curious about when covering this chapter. How was the Seer a keeper when the only ones that we met were Leena and Balthas? I guess we can now assume that Leena maintained the Order of Keepers, even in the absence of Balthas and the Epoch, following the events in the Keeper's camp. The next question was another one of mine, surprisingly. And I tripped Kyle up for a minute by using the Orobyss emote.
What's your favorite paradox that currently exists in the game? Mine is the Predestination Paradox in Chapter 4, with the Imperial Officer's crest being Officer Hump's crest, and the future Last EP1 Orobyss. I have to say my favorite's Orobyss as well.
That's a like an emoji.
Oh, I like it as well. Yeah.
but like that's, it just comes through as text in these.
I don't know what your problem with Orobyss is. I love it.
That was.
I know. What you're
Okay.
I'll say my favorite paradox is one that hasn't been encountered by players yet.
Ooh.
It's gonna be something that happens in one of our upcoming 3 campaign chapters.
Okay, that's exciting, travelers. I do love a good paradox. The stream started winding down from here and they began taking rapid fire questions. The next one is about the Ancient Era.
From Mr. Fibble, the Ancient Era seems to be very underutilized. Will we get to see more of it in the future? Hold tight for one of the upcoming remaining 3 campaign chapters, as we'll say there.
Simple enough. I think seeing more of the Ancient Era is one of the most requested things about the story. Kyle gives us a little lore tease with this next one.
Oh, there's one here. Who made the Vessels of Chaos and Memory in the Echo Web, in the timelines?
Oh, same person who made the waypoints and made the monolith.
Pretty cryptic, Kyle. I assume the waypoints were Eterran technology, but maybe not. That was the final rapid fire question answered. Ready for the big news that Kyle dropped?
Do you have anything you want to add on to the end of this? Anything you were hoping to get asked that didn't get asked?
Oh goodness. I put in an Easter egg in End of Time and no one's found it.
Oh my god. You're just gonna drop that nuke and walk away?
Yeah, because I'm still sad that no one's found it.
Oh my god. Well, on that awesome revelation, because I get asked frequently if there's any Easter eggs I'm missing, and I say no.
Unless, I mean, it's an Easter egg if it's something that's like, from somewhere else in the game. Like, it's not an Easter egg to something outside of the game. It's like, it's a secret. I should say it's a secret in End of Time.
All right. That's good. Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. No more hints.
I'm gonna have to double check it if it's actually working, but
do you want me to go to End of Time
about it
and see if you can see it?
What's that?
If I go to End of Time, will you be able to tell if it's there?
You gotta do some certain things to make it happen,
okay.
Which is why I'm starting to wonder if, like, it just, isn't working.
How about this? We will confirm for everyone that's gonna go out and hunt for this. We will confirm that it's working or not, and we'll post it somewhere and ask the devs or something like that, just so that there's like a confirmation if this exists or not. Because I don't want to send people on a wild goose chase. We will confirm if this is working or not before everyone goes off and looks for it.
Kane in chat has said it is working. Last he checked.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, here we go.
Well, I hope I see a screenshot of that thing I put in.
This is news to me, but I love it. Okay.
This was absolutely bonkers, travelers. You know me. If it involves lore, secrets, or Easter eggs in this game, I am all over it. He clarified one thing about the secret as they wrapped up. I made the statement in chat before it ended, that it was time to find it.
Forgot how fun this was from last time. We should do this more often. This is a great time. And one more thing about the secret. It's not the giant Chronowyrm in the back. That guy's obvious. He's hard to miss. But yeah, love you all. Hope to do this again sometime.
After I announced it in the general chat of the official Discord, Mike also confirmed it. From there, I had the opportunity to work with the Perry the Pig that night, and together with the help of his chat, Perry and I solved this 5+ year mystery. If you want to hear more about this Easter egg hunt Perry and I went on, check out Perry the Pig's YouTube channel. He just put out an amazing video covering the whole thing, as well as a little history lesson on how long this mystery has been around. I'll have that link down in the description for you all to check out. Working with him on this was an absolute honor for me, and I hope to do it again sometime soon. Well, that about does it for me on this video, travelers. Again, if you learned something today, please subscribe to my growing Last Epoch lore community. Also, don't forget to join my Discord, Gav's Last Archive. I'll see you all in the next video. Farewell, travelers.